The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, my name is Jillian Schaefer and I'm the Marketing Coordinator for SWK Technologies. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar, Email Automation and Best Practices for Collections, presented by Matt Shanahan of Lockstep. A little housekeeping before we get started. Everyone has been placed on mute to keep the background noise down. However, you can submit any questions you have throughout the webinar. To submit a question, look for the questions section in your GoToWebinar. We will answer all questions at the end of the presentation. We are recording this presentation and will be distributed tomorrow to all attendees as well as to those who registered but were not able to attend. Please take a moment at the end of the presentation to answer our one survey question. With that said, we appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to attend our webinar. We're here to help you get the most out of your software solutions and help you find an easier way to run your business by providing you software and industry knowledge, tools, and support whenever you need it. We've invited Lockstep Collect here today because they are the industry experts on AR automation. So whether you're here doing research for a new solution or you're just here to learn, we'd like to encourage you to ask any questions throughout the webinar. Lastly, as a quick reminder, SWK is constantly sharing important updates and software tips and tricks on our social media channels, so we encourage you to follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Without further ado, I'll hand it over to Matt.
Thank you, Jolene. And welcome, everyone. As Jolene said, my name is Matt Shanahan. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Lockstep. One of the things that I do as in part of my role is to hold roundtable discussions with customers and listen to what people are saying about the current environment. One of the big discussions this year has really been all about digital transformation. And I say this year, it's a new year, but last year and into this year. So the pandemic has really brought about kind of a view of needing to rethink the way that accounts receivable and collections is run. And a pivotal thing that keeps coming up is really around email automation. And that's what we'll spend our time today talking about. So first, I'll give a little bit of background about our product, Lockstep Collect. It's an AR automation solution. And then we'll talk very deeply about email automation. So it really is the one tool you need to get communications out to your customers. Then we'll talk about some of the best practices of those collections emails and how to get customers to act on your email. So a little bit about Lockstep Collect. It is really designed to help you collect your cash faster. It's a cloud-based solution that integrates directly with your existing accounting solution. It automates customer and contact data management, which is a very important part of, do you have the right information about your customers? There's automated customer communications, including things like SMS and automated calls, but the most important part is really that email automation we'll talk about. There's a customer self-service portal that allows people to go online, access their accounts, be able to make payments, directly through the web. And then collections activity management. How do you get your team to focus on the right activities at the right time? And finally, forecasting and reporting of your collections process and your cash flow. So those are all important things. It's a broad solution, but today we'll focus really on the email automation side of things. We serve some great brands. We have over 180 customers and growing, thousands of users every day using the systems. And we're the leader in ERP integration. I know a lot of you will be using Sage 100 or maybe Acumatica. So, we have the integrations to all of those ERPs and adding more all the time. So let's take a look at the case for email automation. Deloitte did a survey recently asking kind of what is the priority of CFOs? And over 50% of CFOs said that managing cash and liquidity is the top priority. So nothing else comes ahead of that. And, one of the things that's important to think about in terms of managing cash flow and liquidity is one of the easiest and kind of cheapest ways to get cash is from customers, right? By streamlining collections and making that a priority. The challenge has been really that the pandemic has exposed, paper as a cash trap. It's hard to believe that so much paper is still used in invoicing and collections. Almost 40% of all invoices are sent as paper. One analyst with whom I recently spoke indicated that the US was a lot closer to 50% paper-based invoicing. It's hard to believe because it's so slow, right? You send it in the mail and you wait for a paper check to come back. It's expensive. You've got printing, you've got stamps, you've got envelopes, you've got storage. There's all kinds of expense that goes into it. And it's very time consuming because it has to be handled by somebody. Even if you're using a scanning solution, there's a lot of manual intervention involved. So the reality, is, I just mentioned, if you're issuing a paper invoice, you're also likely to get a paper check. That is just slowing your cash flow down. So paper is clearly a cash trap, and eliminating paper really improves cash flow. So it's really, as I mentioned in these roundtables, people that we've talked to say it is an imperative right now to get rid of paper and move to email as an electronic form of doing that. That's where we have one of our first poll questions. We're just always interested, this is one of the things we talk to people about all the time, is what percentage of your invoices are sent as paper? So the poll is open and encourage you to give your response to that. And Jolene, are you able to share any results?
Yep. And it looks like about 50% responded 0 to 10%, 8% are 10 to 20%, 8% are 20 to 40%, and 33% said 40% or more.
So that's, it's something to think about is, first step in a digital transformation is thinking about how do you get those paper invoices to email. But now, just as I say that, right, the pandemic has exposed email as a cash trap too. So that, this is where we'll sort of unpack it, because simply moving invoices to email doesn't solve the complete problem. Most accounting departments use Outlook and Excel as their technology stack. Outlook and Excel creates a lot of manual work. They're not integrated with the accounting system. So it means that you're constantly transcribing data from email into the accounting system or the accounting system into email. And with no automation, it means follow-ups, promise tracking, dispute resolution. That's all manual. You're doing that in spreadsheets, right, to keep it up to date. And without activity management, visibility across the team, especially in a remote situation, is very difficult to understand and control. The typical accounting department in collections will look like this. There's some sort of shared inbox. There might be an alias, that's accounts receivable at company.com. And then individual people work out of their personal inboxes. So they grab something from the shared inbox and start to work it that way. We interviewed through surveys over 900 companies, and we found that over 90% of them run collections this way. They're using Outlook and Excel, personal inboxes, and then using spreadsheets to track things. The problem this creates is the fact that these are cash traps, especially the personal inbox. Once an email is sent from a personal inbox, the conversation back and forth with the customer is going to be sucked into an information black hole, especially if that person is out of the office or busy on another project. The conversation can stall, right? And nobody has visibility into that personal inbox. It's not visible to others on the team. The manual composition of email, so Outlook doesn't automatically generate these emails. Somebody has to manually compose them, address them, and send them, and that creates bottlenecks. There are also so many emails that somebody can send out in a day. And what if somebody leaves the company or is on vacation? Requests and communications about collections to that email address kind of basically fall through the cracks and can get lost. And all of this typically will lead to kind of a reactive environment dealing with escalations of why things didn't get done. So just curious, this is our second poll question, and we're just doing two, but would love to get people's feedback on what they're using in order to process collections emails. We'll give it just a second more, and then please don't be shy.
All right, and it looks like we had about 77% say Outlook or Gmail, and then 23% said other, with 0% saying support desk software.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for sharing with us. So as you can see, a large percentage is actually using Outlook and Excel. So what I'd ask you to do is imagine, if Jolene had used Outlook and Excel to invite you to this webinar. Jolene would have had to, first of all, promote it, meaning manually compose, address, and send thousands of emails. That's a lot of work. If you responded to those emails, right, Jolene would sort of manually read and enter those responses into a spreadsheet saying, oh, this person said they're going to come. And then confirm that, send the event information to you after you registered. And then remind, right before the webinar, you've got a reminder that this is going to take place. Compose, address, and send that back. And then follow up, sending the link to the video afterwards. So that would have been a ton of work, and the results would have been a lot less, because it's really not practical to send, for Jolene to write, 1,000 emails and send those out manually. And yet, if you look at the fact that across the journey, the customer journey, marketing doesn't do it that way. They use MailChimp, right, or Marketo, or any number of marketing automation solutions. Sales has Salesforce, right? So they can automate a lot of that key activity. Support even has Zendesk, right? Where we just talked about that they're able to automatically send announcements, reminders, all kinds of things out. But then you get to accounting, and all they have is Outlook, right? It really is a customer-facing operation that should think about, how do we scale up communications, the right communications at the right time, just like all the other customer-facing organizations do. And the reason this is important, we do benchmarks with customers a couple of different ways. We'll look at customers prior to going live with our AR automation solution, and then 6 months on, what does that look like? So we're constantly benchmarking within a customer and between customers. And here's what we consistently see. So our current benchmarks, which is again across over 180 customers, shows that prior to automation, manual email had average days delinquent of 39 days. After email automation, there was a drop of almost 54% of average days delinquent down to 18. That's pretty significant improvement that you see in terms of cash flow. And it's really coming from that, just throwing that one switch of turning email automation up. Not only did it increase cash flow and working capital, but it also freed up a ton of staff time to focus on higher priority activities. So, are there disputes that need to be resolved? How do we create, more white glove service to our best customers? All of those kinds of things can now be done because the staff time is freed up to focus on those priorities. So we can see the importance in the case for email automation. We're all familiar with, the examples that exist in other departments. Lockstep Collect provides the same kind of email automation, but designed for accounting and specifically the collections process. So let's talk about then the best practices of using email automation. The first is that bad contact data is really a barrier to being able to take advantage and achieve that reduction in day sales outstanding, right? So to improve cash flow, you need really good contact data. What are the problems with that? Well, if you've been in business for 20 to 30 years, many of your processes were based, on physical paper, right? And momentum may have kept it that way. When we engage companies in creating online access for them, we find that a significant number of the accounts in the accounting system are missing an email address. right? So that's an important thing to get fixed. In an email might actually be invalid, right? So you have an email address, but when you check it, it actually bounces, right? So the person may have left, they may have changed their domain name. There's any number of things why those change. It could be the wrong one. The email address in the accounting system might have been the buyer, but not the accounts payable department. And so you're sending emails, and this happens very frequently, sending emails to the person who signed the contract, and they sort of ignore it because they assume that you've also sent a copy to the accounts payable department. And that wrong email address delays payments. So getting the right ones in there is critical. And then wherever possible, not sending to a personal, so Matt at lockstep.io, but sending it to ap@lockstep.io is much more important. You want a role-based email address, because role-based email addresses, first of all, if I left the company, it would get stuck in this crack again. But role-based addresses tend to have a better SLA. So they have a service level agreement, at which point they actually get processed much more effectively. So a key best practice is to really make sure your contact data is correct. There's a way to harvest emails for missing ones, having a process by which you get those in and make sure that every account has a proper email address. Being able to quickly verify those. There's tools like Bright Verify that can quickly do that, and that's what we use with our customers. And then verify correctness, asking people to say, is this the right accounts payable department address? So getting the customer to confirm that this is correct as well. So that's a kind of a number one best practice. Is your data correct and up to date? The next is really thinking about, are you doing a good job to stay out of a spam folder? 69% of recipients report email as spam based on just the subject line. And so it's really important to think about how are the invoices not going into the spam folder? And for instance, these are key trigger words that you would want to really avoid. In things like money, cash, check, all of those are kind of triggers for phishing, scams, and things like that. Those are, believe it or not, some of the things that we go in and find, especially for like a reminder or dunning, there'll be some kind of elevated language that includes some of these words, like, we don't want to refer you to a credit bureau. You want to keep that kind of thing out of the subject lines and really think about thoughtful ways of getting that in there. And also thinking about how to put preview text in. So the preview text allows somebody to very quickly see what this email is about and why it's valuable and important to them. And that can be that first line that kind of in the email is part of the preview. But it's really important. In fact, studies have suggested that the preview text can increase the click-through rates, the open and the action by up to 30%. So it's really important that, again, getting all the right information visible, allowing somebody to be able to see that and take action right away up front. Other key factor is really around personalization. So when you personalize, the open rates are much higher than when you don't. Studies have shown that customers are much more likely to interact with email if there is personalization in place. And so it's something to think about. And I'll show you just an example of what are the key things for personalization. How does that relate to accounts receivable and collections? Well, one, is it relevant to the aging of the invoice? Are you sending the right message at the right time? Things like tonality, right? So, on a friendly reminder, it's not due yet, but it's maybe due in a couple of days. It's going to have a much friendlier tonality than, for instance, the second past due notice, right? It will have an escalation, or a third past due. Those are going to be kind of different things. And remember, just in general, having that communication be relevant so they can see everything else that they need to do and take clear action is is incredibly important. So here you see there's a single button in the middle that makes it really clear, here's what we want you to do. And it's been personalized to put somebody's first name in there, what's due, key dates, all of that are in there, along with a signature, such that they could follow up with you directly if they need to. We talk about visuals. So the previous, what you saw in the previous screen was just the visuals were very clean, very easy to understand. And even simple things like fonts that really people want to just see something as one standard thing. So if there's different colors or there's different sizes of the fonts and everything else, then they start to think about, is this a fraudulent email? They very quickly might put it into their spam folder. So having a very simple, clean presentation of the information is critical as well. And then timing and frequency are also very important. Are you providing the right reminders? As I mentioned, what we've seen as a best practice, if somebody has an open balance on their invoice and it's coming due in 5 days, send that reminder. And then the day of, if there's still an open balance, also say, hey, it's due today, just to let you know. Those are important reminders. So nothing's gone past due, but you are letting them know that you're watching this and they're aware, and they tend to respond much more effectively. But then there's the question of, are you overloading them? So one thing that's also important, if a customer has 5 open invoices with you, don't send 5 emails. Make sure that you're sending one email that's summarizing the 5 and not trying to overload them that way. So the email automation has to be smart enough to be able to do those kinds of things. Are you not reaching out to them enough? Again, this is one of those things where if you don't send a reminder and you wait till something goes past due, that's your first communication with them. Or, if you say, in the case of if you're only using Outlook today, chances are you're not sending reminders. You're only waiting till it goes past due a certain amount. So those are the things of saying, no, if you reach out the right amount, right? So not too much, not too little, you're going to be able to get really good results. And then it's very important to know when the automation should go on hold. There's nothing more frustrating for a customer to get a reminder to pay an invoice that might be in dispute. So if something's in dispute, that should not be getting automation on there. Or if there's an escalation or another issue, having the ability to say, hey, we'll turn off notices on this invoice is really, really important. So those are some of the things when you think about timing and frequency, these are kind of key questions around the collections process that are important to be able to deal with. Now, the last part of our presentation is really talking about how do you get customers to take action? What we've seen is if you have an attachment of the invoice itself, you can see whether or not they opened the mail, but you're not sure if they took action or not. So I can say, oh yes, you opened the email, but did you really take action? So we really started working a best practice that says, replace attachments with what's called a magic link access to the online account. So a magic link is like a one-time password. It's a secure access route that is really powerful because it allows somebody to use like an online self-service portal, but not have to use a password, right? So they can go in, they can click on the magic link, gain access to their invoice, make a payment, any of that kind of thing, and not have to have a password. What's great about that is then you have visibility into, their, here's an example of taking, a call to action to make that happen. But then as soon as they click on that, it brings them to like a portal where you can actually see what they're doing as they access it. So have they downloaded the invoice? Have they interacted with that? That's a very important part to say, yes, they are in the process of making, taking care of paying that. Remember that accounts payable is your counterpart. They have a responsibility to make sure their books are up to date. That's important to them because they don't want to fail their audits. If they don't keep their books up to date, they'll fail their audits. They've got to have accurate reporting to their executives. So knowing that they're processing your invoices will give you visibility into the fact that they are indeed actually staying on time. They also tend to have very specific, they call it days payable outstanding. So they have a certain policy that they want to make sure everything's paid. Maybe they paid 10 days late all the time, right? So if you do net 30, they pay you 40 days. Knowing that and knowing that they're processing it is really important. So we talked, kind of through some key aspects here. One is, this digital transformation journey that people are on is definitely replacing paper with email communication. That's critical. But then also thinking about what is the software that you're using around these emails? How do you replace these personal inboxes with really email automation in a shared workspace for a team? And then we talked about really changing behavior is to think about getting rid of attachments as an approach and thinking about how do you provide online access through something like Magic Links. If you'd like more information about Lockstep Collect or kind of how to start your digital transformation journey, please contact your SWK account manager for more information. Also, feel free to visit us at lockstep.io. You can request a demo there, or look at our blog, and we have some white papers as well. So I encourage you to take advantage of that. And with that, I'll open it up for any questions that people might have.
Thanks, Matt. We'll now open it up for questions. If you have any questions, please enter them into the questions section of your GoToWebinar, and we'll give that a minute in case any more come through. And just a reminder, everyone, we do have a subject matter expert here. This is a great opportunity to have your questions answered in real time. And Matt, we do have a few that came through during the presentation. The first is, how do you collect emails from customers with missing email addresses?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's really hard to call up a bunch of people and try, especially if you have thousands of emails to try and collect, and call them and ask for that. What we've done with companies is to, in the paper statement now, or any invoice that goes out, is to put a notice in there of a URL where they can go online and actually register their account with an email address. So it just gets printed into the statement. It says, please visit this URL to gain access to your online account. And they put in their account number, and they put in their email address, and then that gets provisioned. We did that for a company that was in the security services business. They do monitoring of business for security. And they were at one point doing 4,600 paper statements per month. They went through this process, and they're now down to less than 300 paper statements per month. And just the operational expense alone, just the direct expense, is a $70,000 a year savings on that.
Wonderful. And we have another. Do you have best practice email templates?
Yes. So great question. The best practices that I walked you through, we do have a best practice library. So there's a whole set of ones out there, and we're starting to publish those into our blogs as well. So they're available that way too.
We have another. How can you track customer actions?
So in our solution, as I mentioned, the ability to see what customers do through the self-service portal allows you to have reporting on that. So we provide actual reports that look at what customers are making visits, who's making payments, what are they doing when they access it. So that's kind of a standard, it's kind of like Google Analytics for your self-service portal.
We have another. Do you have any experience using this approach when the customer is a school or school system?
Yes. So we have done that exact thing. So we have several customers that are in that that provide services to other government agencies, including schools. And so, yes, we do have experience in that.
And that looks like all the questions, so I'll take back the screen. Just give me 1 minute. Perfect. Thank you so much, Matt, for your informative presentation and for taking the time to be here today. And thank you everyone for attending our webinar. Have a wonderful rest of your day.